The massive library on Kepler Prime stretched across 3 floating platforms, each one bigger than most space stations. Students from hundreds of different worlds came here to study at the most famous university in the galaxy. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime as beings spoke in clicks, whistles, and sounds that had no names. Zixtal pressed her crystal hand against the data terminal, her blue form flickering slightly as she concentrated. Her people, the Vorthans, were known for their logical minds and perfect memory. That's why she found the gap in the records so strange. "There's something missing here," she said to her research partners. Her voice came out in musical tones that the translator turned into standard galactic speech. Mumbara's antenna twitched with interest. The insect-like Kelthani was always hungry for new information to share with her hive mind back home. "Missing how?" she asked, her mandibles clicking softly. Quinross floated nearby, his energy-based form glowing a soft yellow. The Etherian rarely spoke, but when he did, others listened. His people were the galaxy's peacekeepers, wise and calm. "Show us," he said simply. Zixtal pulled up the military history files they had been studying for months. Their thesis was about extinct species and how they had fought in the old wars. It should have been simple research, but nothing about this project felt simple anymore. "Look at this timeline," Zixtal said, pointing to the holographic display. 200 years ago, there was a major war with the Scarith Empire. The records show it lasted exactly 6 months. Before that, wars with the Scarith went on for years, sometimes decades. Mumbara leaned forward, her compound eyes reflecting the data streams. "So they developed better weapons?" "That's what I thought too," Zixtal replied. "But look at the casualty reports. The Scarith Empire lost everything, not just the war. Their entire civilization disappeared. Every world they controlled was captured. Every ship was destroyed or taken. Every leader was removed from power." Quinross pulsed a brighter yellow, which meant he was thinking hard. "Who did this to them?" "That's the problem," Zixtal said, her crystals dimming with frustration. "The records just say coalition forces won the war. But when I try to find out which species were part of this coalition, most of the files are locked or missing." She pulled up another screen. "I found some partial records. The Altarians were there and the Zephyrian fleet. But there are references to another group that I can't identify. Look at this." The hologram showed a damaged report. Most of it was unreadable, but a few words stood out. "Terran forces exceeded all expectations. Unconventional tactics. Psychological impact severe. Recommend immediate." The rest was gone. "Terran?" Mumbara repeated. "I've never heard of that species." "Neither have I," Quinross said. "And my people keep records of every species in the galaxy." Zixtal's excitement grew. Her crystal form flickered faster when she was onto something interesting. "I searched for Terran in every database. Most searches come back empty, but I found this." She showed them an old species catalog. There was an entry for Terrans, but it was marked with red text. Status: extinct, relocated. Military classification restricted. Galaxy war participation absolutely forbidden. The 3 students stared at the screen in silence. "Forbidden?" Mumbara whispered. "Why would an extinct species be forbidden from wars?" "Maybe they're not extinct," Quinross said quietly. Zixtal was already working on her terminal again, her crystal fingers moving faster than most organic beings could think. "I'm searching for any other references to this Terran incident that was mentioned in the damaged file." What she found made her form flicker so quickly that her friends thought she might overload. "There are thousands of references," she said, her voice filled with wonder and worry. "But they're all classified. Every single one. The only thing I can access are the classification codes, and they're all marked Galactic Security. Highest priority." Mumbara's hive mind connection was buzzing with excitement. Her people loved mysteries, especially ones that might involve military secrets. "Can you break the encryption?" "I shouldn't," Zixtal said. But even as she spoke, her logical mind was already working on the problem. "These files are protected by quantum locks. If I try to break them and fail, we'll be expelled from the university." "And if we succeed?" Quinross asked. "Then we might learn something that the entire galaxy has been trying to hide for 200 years. They worked through the night. Zixtal used her perfect memory to find patterns in the classification codes. Mumbara connected to her hive mind, using the combined processing power of millions of her sisters to crack the quantum encryption. Quinross used his energy-based nature to interface directly with the computer systems, sliding through security like light through glass. Just before dawn, they broke through. The first file that opened was a star chart. It showed a section of the galaxy marked as Dead Zone, no entry, automated defense active. "Look at these coordinates," Zixtal said, her voice barely above a whisper. The Dead Zone was in the outer rim, far from any major trade routes or colonies. According to the official records, it had been poisoned by some kind of ancient weapon during the old wars. No life could survive there. Ships that entered the zone were never seen again, but the star chart they were looking at told a different story. It showed energy readings, mineral extraction operations, and what looked like massive space stations. The file was dated just 3 months ago. "This doesn't look dead to me," Mumbara said. Quinross was studying another file. "Look at this. It's a list of supply shipments to something called Terran Containment Zone. Food, medical supplies, raw materials. Enough to support billions of people. Containment?" Zixtal repeated. "You contain dangerous things. You contain weapons or diseases or dangerous people," Quinross finished. They found more files. Reports about breeding populations and cultural preservation. Documents about isolation protocols and reintegration studies. And everywhere, the same message. The Terrans were too dangerous to be allowed back into galactic society. But dangerous how? They had been banned from all wars, which suggested they were good at fighting. But lots of species were good at fighting. The Kralix were natural predators. The Scarith had been conquerors. The Zephyrians had weapons that could crack planets. What made humans so different that the entire galaxy had to lock them away? As the university began to wake up around them, the three friends stared at their discovery. They had found proof that an entire species had been hidden away for 2 centuries. A species so dangerous that even mentioning them was classified. "We have to go there," Zixtal said finally. "Go where?" Mumbara asked, though she already knew the answer. "To the Dead Zone. We have to find out what the galaxy is so afraid of." Quinross pulsed a worried orange. "The automated defenses will destroy us." "Maybe," Zixtal said. "Or maybe they'll do something else. Maybe they'll take us to meet the people the galaxy has been hiding." She looked at the star chart again, memorizing the coordinates with her perfect crystal memory. "We came here to study extinct species and their military contributions. Well, I think we just found the most important military force in galactic history, and they're not extinct at all." The 3 students made their decision. They would steal a ship, break through a galactic quarantine, and discover the truth about the species that had been erased from history. They had no idea that their journey would change everything they thought they knew about war, peace, and what it really meant to be dangerous. The stolen research vessel Curiosity's Edge drifted at the border of the Dead Zone like a tiny insect approaching a spider's web. Through the viewports, the 3 students could see nothing but empty space and distant stars. The official navigation charts showed this area as a void. No planets, no stations, nothing but radiation and death. But their stolen files told a different story. "Sensors aren't picking up anything," Mumbara reported from the pilot's seat. Her compound eyes reflected the instrument displays as she worked the controls with 4 arms at once. "If there's a civilization here, it's hidden better than anything in galactic history." Zixtal stood at the sensor station, her crystal form flickering with concentration. Her people could process data faster than most computers, but even she was having trouble making sense of the readings. "The radiation levels are wrong," she said. "The charts say this area should be deadly to all known life forms. But these numbers, they're artificial." "Artificial how?" Quinross asked. The Etherian floated near the navigation console, his energy-based body glowing a nervous blue-green. "It's like someone is broadcasting fake sensor readings," Zixtal explained, "creating a wall of false information to hide what's really here." Their ship suddenly shuddered. Emergency lights began flashing red throughout the cabin. "What was that?" Mumbara's voice cracked with fear. "Unknown," Zixtal replied, but her crystal form was flickering faster now. "We're being scanned. Something very powerful is looking at us." The main view screen suddenly came alive with text in a dozen different languages. But the message was the same in all of them. "Warning. You have entered restricted space, authorized personnel, only Terran containment. Zone turn back immediately or face automated defense Terran," Quinross whispered. "We found them." Before anyone could react, their ship's engines died. The lights went out except for emergency power. And then, impossibly, a new voice came through their communications system. It was speaking Galactic Standard, but with an accent none of them had ever heard. Unknown vessel, you are trespassing in protected space. Identify yourselves and state your purpose. Sixtel moved to the communications panel with shaking crystal hands. This is a research vessel from Kepler Prime University. We're students. We didn't know anyone lived here. There was a long pause. Then, students? What kind of students enter a quarantine zone? We're studying military history, Mumbara said, taking over the conversation. We found references to Terrans in old war records. We thought you were extinct. Another pause, longer this time. Then the voice spoke again, and this time it sounded amused. Extinct? No, not extinct, just contained. You've caused quite a stir here, students. No one from the outside galaxy has visited us in over 50 years. The outside galaxy? Quinros asked. That's what we call it, the voice replied. Everything beyond our little prison. You're going to have to come with us, I'm afraid. You've seen too much to simply turn around and leave. Their ship suddenly lurched as something took control of it. Through the viewports, they could see massive mechanical arms extending from what had appeared to be empty space. The arms were connected to a structure so large that their sensors couldn't measure all of it at once. What is that thing? Bara breathed. As they were pulled deeper into the hidden system, the false radiation field faded away like morning mist. What they saw beyond it made all three students forget how to speak. Planets. Dozens of them, all blue and green and brown, all obviously alive and thriving. Space stations the size of moons orbited each world, connected by streams of ships that moved in perfect formation. Industrial complexes that stretched across entire continents sent rivers of light flowing between the planets, and everywhere, defenses. Weapon platforms that could crack moons, shield generators that covered entire worlds, fleets of warships that moved in patterns none of them recognized, but which somehow felt perfectly organized and deadly. How many people live here? Sixtel asked in a tiny voice. Currently, about 15 billion. The voice on the radio replied casually, not counting the research stations and deep space facilities. We've been busy during our isolation. Their ship was guided to a space station that looked like it had been built inside a hollowed-out asteroid. As they docked, the students could see other ships moving around them. But these weren't like any vessels in the galactic fleet. They were sleek and dangerous-looking, built for speed and stealth rather than cargo or exploration. Who are you people? Quinros asked. We're Terrans, the voice replied. We're humans. And you, students, are about to learn why the galaxy is so afraid of us. The docking bay was filled with beings that looked almost familiar but not quite right. They walked on two legs like many species did, but they moved differently. There was a confidence in the way they carried themselves, a readiness that reminded Zixtal of predators she had studied. But they also looked ordinary. No natural weapons like the Kralix had. No armored shells like the Kelthani. No energy manipulation like the Etherians. Just soft-looking creatures with pale skin and strange hair covering their heads. One of them approached their ship. She was clearly old, her hair was white and lines marked her face but she moved like a much younger being. When she spoke, it was in the same accented voice they had heard on the radio. Welcome to New Terra Station. I'm Admiral Sarah Chen, current commander of the Terran Defense Force. You can consider yourselves our guests. For now. The three students followed Admiral Chen through corridors that hummed with quiet efficiency. Everything was clean and organized, but there was something about the design that felt different from galactic standard architecture. The walls had strange angles. The lighting created shadows in unexpected places. It was as if the whole station was designed to confuse anyone who didn't belong there. You built all this in just 200 years? Mumbara asked. We had a lot of motivation, Admiral Chen replied. When the entire galaxy tells you that you're too dangerous to be allowed in civilized space, you tend to focus on proving them right. They entered a large room with windows that looked out at the hidden system. The view was incredible. Worlds and stations and ships as far as they could see, all working together in perfect harmony. This is our situation room, Admiral Chen said. From here we monitor everything that happens in this system and everything that happens beyond it. We know about every ship that enters our space, every communication that tries to reach us, and every decision the Galactic Council makes about our future. You spy on the galaxy? Sixtel asked. We protect ourselves, Admiral Chen corrected. The galaxy made it very clear that we're not welcome, so we make sure they can't surprise us." She gestured to the massive displays that covered the walls. They showed star charts, ship movements, and what looked like military installations throughout the galaxy. "The question is," Admiral Chen continued, turning to face the three students, "what are we going to do with you? You've discovered our secret. You know we exist, you know where we are, and you know we're not the helpless prisoners the galaxy thinks we are." "We won't tell anyone," Quinro said quickly. Admiral Chen smiled, but it wasn't a comforting expression. "Oh, but you will. You're students. You're researchers. You live to share what you discover. That's not a criticism, it's just who you are." She walked to one of the windows and looked out at the hidden civilization her people had built. "The real question is whether you'll understand what you found before you share it. Whether you'll learn the whole truth about why we're here and why the galaxy is so terrified of letting us out." "What is the truth?" Zixtel asked. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned back to them, and her expression was serious and sad and proud all at the same time. "The truth is that we didn't lose the war 200 years ago. We won it so completely, so thoroughly, that the entire galaxy united against us just to make us stop. And the truth is that every day we stay in this prison, we get better at the one thing that made them fear us in the first place." "What thing?" Umbara whispered. "War," Admiral Chen said simply. "We are very, very good at war." Admiral Chen led the three students through a transport tunnel that connected the space station to New Terra, the largest human colony world in the system. As they traveled, Zixtal noticed that every human they passed stopped what they were doing and nodded respectfully to the Admiral. But they also looked at the alien students with curious eyes, as if visitors from the outside galaxy were the most interesting thing they had seen in years. "How long has it been since outsiders came here?" Quinross asked. "You're the first in my lifetime," Admiral Chen replied. "The last official visitors were Galactic Council inspectors, and that was over 50 years ago. They came to check that we were following the terms of our containment. They left very quickly. The transport emerged onto the surface of New Terra, and the students got their first look at a human world. It was beautiful in a way that reminded them of the peaceful worlds of the Etherians, but there was something different about it. The cities were designed with clear sight lines and multiple escape routes. The transportation networks could obviously be used to move military equipment quickly. Even the farms were arranged in patterns that would be defensible in case of attack. "You built this world like a fortress," Ma'ambara observed. "We built every world like a fortress," Admiral Chen said. "When you're surrounded by enemies, you learn to think defensively." They arrived at what Admiral Chen called the War College, a massive building that looked like it could hold 100,000 people. Inside, the walls were covered with star charts, battle plans, and holographic displays showing military movements from across the galaxy. "This is where we study war," Admiral Chen explained. "Every human child spends at least 2 years here, learning about military history, strategy, and tactics. Not because we want to fight, but because we need to be ready if fighting finds us." She led them to a large auditorium where several hundred human students were already seated. The alien visitors caused a stir of whispered conversations, but everyone quickly fell silent when Admiral Chen walked to the center of the room. "Today's lesson will be different," she announced. "We have guests from the outside galaxy, students who have discovered our existence and want to know why we're here. I think it's time they learned about the Terran incident." The lights dimmed and a massive holographic display appeared above their heads. It showed a star chart of the galaxy as it was 200 years ago. "Before the incident," Admiral Chen began, "humans were new to galactic society. We had just developed faster-than-light travel and made contact with the Galactic Council. We were excited to join the community of intelligent species and contribute to galactic civilization. The display showed human ships meeting with alien vessels, trade agreements being signed, and human colonies being established on the edges of known space. We were invited to join the Galactic Defense Coalition," Admiral Chen continued. "The galaxy was having trouble with the Scarith Empire, a militaristic species that had been conquering their neighbors for decades. Previous wars with the Scarith had lasted years and cost millions of lives. The Council thought that fresh troops and new perspectives might help." Zixtal remembered the record she had found. "The war only lasted 6 months. "Exactly," Admiral Chen said with a grim smile. The Council expected us to take defensive positions and help hold the line while they negotiated a peace treaty. That's how galactic wars usually worked. Show strength, make the enemy pay a price, then negotiate a settlement that both sides could accept. The holographic display showed the beginning of the war. Human ships were small compared to the massive vessels of other species, but there were a lot of them, and they moved in complex patterns that seemed almost random. But humans don't think about war the way other species do, Admiral Chen explained. When we fight to win completely, not to gain an advantage for negotiations, not to capture territory or resources. We fight to eliminate the threat entirely. What do you mean? Quinross asked, though his energy form was already glowing a worried orange. Watch, Admiral Chen said. The display showed the first human engagement with Scarith forces. Instead of the traditional fleet-to-fleet battle that everyone expected, the human ships spread out across an enormous area of space. Some attacked the enemy fleet directly, but others did something no one had ever seen before. They attacked everything else. While the Scarith were focused on our battle fleet, Admiral Chen narrated, other human forces were hitting their supply lines, their communication networks, their shipyards, and their colony worlds. We didn't just fight their military, we fought their entire civilization. The display showed Scarith supply convoys being destroyed, communication satellites going dark, and orbital factories being captured or eliminated. Within weeks, the mighty Scarith fleet found itself cut off from resupply and unable to coordinate with their home worlds. That's comprehensive, Mumbara said quietly. It gets worse, Admiral Chen replied. Or better, depending on your point of view. The display showed human forces landing on Scarith worlds, but instead of the brutal planetary invasions that everyone expected, something else happened. Massive information campaigns flooded the Scarith communication networks. Human forces specifically targeted Scarith leaders while protecting civilian populations. Propaganda broadcasts explained to ordinary Scarith citizens that their government had started an aggressive war that was now lost. Psychological warfare, Zixtal said, understanding beginning to dawn in her crystal mind. We didn't just defeat their military, Admiral Chen confirmed. We convinced their own people to surrender. We turned the Scarith population against their leaders. Within 3 months, there were Scarith colonies declaring independence from their empire and asking to join the Galactic Council under human protection. The display showed the final phase of the war. The Scarith Empire, which had been a threat to the galaxy for decades, simply fell apart. Their fleet surrendered. Their leaders fled or were captured. Their aggressive expansion stopped completely. And then, Admiral Chen said, we kept going. Kept going how? Quinross asked, though he clearly didn't want to hear the answer. The Scarith had allies, Admiral Chen explained. Species that had helped them, supplied them, or simply looked the other way while they conquered their neighbors. From a human perspective, these species were also threats. They had supported our enemies, so they needed to be dealt with. The display showed human forces moving beyond Scarith space into the territories of their former allies. The same pattern repeated. Comprehensive attacks on military and civilian infrastructure, psychological warfare campaigns, and the rapid collapse of organized resistance. How many species did you deal with? Mumbara asked. 12, Admiral Chen replied. In 6 months, human forces had defeated or forced the surrender of 12 different species. We occupied over 300 worlds, captured thousands of ships, and eliminated every military threat in that entire sector of the galaxy. The 3 students sat in stunned silence. Around them, the human students watched with expressions of pride and sadness. We thought we were being helpful, Admiral Chen continued. We had eliminated a major threat to galactic peace. We had freed dozens of oppressed worlds. We had brought stability to a region that had been at war for decades. But the galaxy didn't see it that way, Zixtal said, beginning to understand. No, they didn't. Admiral Chen's voice was heavy with old pain. They saw a new species that could defeat anyone, conquer anything, and show no mercy to their enemies. They saw humans as a threat bigger than the Scarith had ever been. The display changed to show the galaxy's response. Species that had been enemies for centuries suddenly formed alliances. The Galactic Council called emergency sessions. Military forces from across the galaxy began moving toward human space. 47 different species, Admiral Chen said. 47 species that had never agreed on anything before, all united by one thing: Their fear of what humans might do next. So they went to war with you? Quinross asked. Admiral Chen shook her head. They were smarter than that. They knew that a direct military confrontation would cost billions of lives and might not even succeed. Instead, they offered us a choice. The display showed the final act of the Terran incident, a massive fleet of alien ships surrounding the human colonies but not attacking, messages being sent back and forth, negotiations that lasted for weeks. They offered us exile, Admiral Chen said simply. Complete withdrawal from galactic society in exchange for being left alone. We could keep our colonies in this system, but we could never leave it. We could never participate in galactic politics or military actions. We would be contained. And you accepted? Mumbara asked. Our leaders did, Admiral Chen replied. They looked at the numbers and realized that fighting 47 species at once would devastate the galaxy. Billions would die, probably including most of humanity. So they agreed to the exile rather than fight a war that would hurt everyone. The holographic display faded, leaving the auditorium in normal light. The human students began to file out quietly, but the 3 alien visitors remained in their seats trying to process what they had learned. That was 200 years ago, Admiral Chen said. Since then, we've built this civilization. Admiral Chen led the 3 students to a smaller room filled with historical documents and recordings. The walls were covered with images from 2 centuries ago. Alien diplomats in heated discussion, massive fleets gathering at the edges of human space, and the faces of human leaders who had to make the hardest decision in their species' history. What I showed you in the auditorium was the official version, Admiral Chen said as she activated a private holographic projector. The one we teach our children so they understand why we're here. But there's more to the story. Details that even most humans don't know. The display showed the interior of what looked like a massive space station. Beings from dozens of different species sat around a circular table, their faces showing fear, anger, and desperate determination. This is the emergency session of the Galactic Council that took place after our victory over the Scarith, Admiral Chen explained. It was the first time in galactic history that every member species attended the same meeting. Every species? Sixtel asked, her crystal form flickering with surprise. All 47 of them, Admiral Chen confirmed. Species that had been at war with each other for centuries sat at the same table because they were all afraid of the same thing, us. The recording began to play. The translation systems were old and sometimes failed, but the fear in the alien voices came through clearly. The Terrans have demonstrated capabilities beyond our worst projections, said a delegate that looked like Mumbara's people, but older and more scarred. In 6 months, they achieved what our combined fleets could not accomplish in 6 years. Another voice, this one from a species that none of the students recognized. It's not just their military success. It's how they achieved it. They don't fight like civilized beings. They fight like hunters who never stop hunting. A third delegate from a species that looked similar to Quinross but more solid. They targeted civilian infrastructure. They used psychological manipulation. They turned conquered populations against their own governments. These are not the tactics of a civilized species. They're effective tactics, a different voice argued. Perhaps more effective than ours. That's exactly the problem. The first speaker's voice rose with emotion. If we allow this approach to warfare to spread, if other species begin to copy Terran methods, the galaxy will tear itself apart within a generation. Admiral Chen paused the recording. Do you understand what they were really afraid of? She asked the students. They were afraid that you were too good at war, Quinross said slowly. No, Admiral Chen replied. They were afraid that we would teach other species how to be too good at war. They weren't just scared of humans. They were scared of a galaxy where everyone fought like humans. She restarted the recording. The debate continued for hours, with delegates from different species arguing about what to do with humanity. Some wanted to destroy human civilization entirely. Others suggested breaking humanity into smaller groups and scattering them across the galaxy. A few even argued that humans should be studied and their military techniques adopted, but one voice kept returning to the same theme. We cannot destroy them without becoming like them, said an elderly delegate from a species that looked like floating jellyfish. If we wage a war of extermination against the Terrans, we prove that their methods are necessary for survival. We become the very thing we fear. Then what do you propose? Another delegate asked. Isolation, the jellyfish-like being replied. Complete separation from galactic society until we can determine how to integrate them safely. The recording showed weeks of debate, negotiation, and planning. Military experts analyzed human tactics and tried to develop countermeasures. Psychologists studied human behavior and tried to predict what they would do next. Diplomats crafted messages that would convince humanity to accept exile without triggering another war. The final vote was close, Admiral Chen said as the recording showed the delegates casting their decisions. 25 species voted for isolation, 20 voted for military action, and 2 abstained. What would have happened if the vote had gone the other way? M'Bara asked. Admiral Chen's expression grew dark. Total war. Every species in the galaxy against humanity, fighting until one side was completely destroyed. She showed them another set of records, these ones from human archives. The desperate meetings of human leaders as they realized what they were facing. The calculations showing that humanity might win such a war, but at a cost that would destroy galactic civilization. Our leaders had a choice, Admiral Chen said. Accept exile and preserve both humanity and the galaxy, or fight a war that would leave billions dead and turn the galaxy into a wasteland. The display showed the human response to the galactic ultimatum. Admiral Sarah Chen recognized several of the faces, her own ancestors who had helped make the decision that shaped her entire world. We chose exile, she said simply, not because we couldn't win a galactic war, but because winning it would have made us into monsters. So you've been here ever since, Zixtel said. For 200 years, Admiral Chen confirmed. 47 species have been watching us, studying us, trying to figure out how to safely let us back into galactic society. And every few years they send inspectors to make sure we're still contained. But you said the last inspectors came 50 years ago, Quinn-Ross remembered. Admiral Chen smiled, but there was no humor in it. The last official inspectors. We're very good at detecting unofficial ones. She activated another display, this one showing current galactic military movements, ships changing patrol routes, weapons being moved to new positions, communication networks being upgraded with better encryption. The galaxy has spent 2 centuries preparing for the possibility that humans might break containment, Admiral Chen explained. Every major species has developed what they call Terran protocols, military plans specifically designed to counter human tactics. Do they work? M'Bara asked. Some of them might, Admiral Chen admitted. If we were the same humans who accepted exile 200 years ago, but we're not. The display changed to show human military exercises in the outer system, ships moving in patterns that seemed impossible, weapons that bent space itself, and tactics that made the students' heads hurt just trying to understand them. We've had 200 years to think about war, Admiral Chen said. 200 years to study every military conflict in galactic history. 200 years to develop new technologies, new strategies, new ways of thinking about conflict. You've been preparing to break containment, Zixtal said. It wasn't a question. We've been preparing to defend ourselves, Admiral Chen corrected. But yes, some humans believe it's time to end our exile. They argue that we've been punished long enough for the crime of being effective. She showed them recordings of human political debates, passionate arguments between those who wanted to honor the old agreement and those who believed humanity deserved to rejoin galactic society. Younger generation especially, Admiral Chen continued, humans who were born in exile who never agreed to these restrictions. They see our isolation as a prison, not a choice. What do you think? Quinn-Ross asked. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment, looking at the displays showing both human military might and galactic defensive preparations. I think, she said finally, that the galaxy's fear of us has become a self-fulfilling prophecy. They isolated us because we were too dangerous, and that isolation has made us more dangerous than we ever were before. How? M'Bara asked. Because we've had nothing to do for 200 years, except get better at the one thing that made them afraid of us in the first place. Admiral Chen's voice was sad and proud at the same time. We are the most militarily advanced civilization in galactic history, and we've been locked away like a weapon too dangerous to use. So what happens now? Zixtal asked, Admiral. Chen looked at the 3 students, representatives of the galaxy that had imprisoned her people for 2 centuries. Now you go back to your university, and your research, and your normal lives. and you decide whether to tell the galaxy that their prison is no longer strong enough to hold what they put inside it. The room fell silent except for the hum of the computers and the distant sounds of human civilization continuing its daily routine. The three students realized they were sitting at the center of the most important secret in galactic history, and soon they would have to decide what to do with it. "There's one more thing you should know," Admiral Chen said quietly. "This conversation, this entire visit, wasn't an accident. We've been watching the galaxy's academic networks for decades, waiting for someone to ask the right questions. You wanted us to find you," Quinros said, understanding flooding through his energy form. The journey back to Kepler Prime felt like traveling between two different universes. The three students sat in silence for most of the trip, each lost in their own thoughts about what they had discovered. Behind them lay a hidden civilization of 15 billion humans, armed with weapons and knowledge that could reshape the galaxy. Ahead lay their university, their professors, and a decision that would affect every living being in known space. "We have to tell someone," Sixtal said finally as their ship approached the university's space dock. Her crystal form had been flickering constantly since they left human space, a sign of deep mental processing. "Do we?" Quinros asked. His energy body glowed a confused mixture of colors. Admiral Chen said herself that humans have been waiting for the galaxy to ask the right questions. "Maybe we're not supposed to give answers, maybe we're supposed to help people ask better questions." Mumbara's antenna twitched nervously. Her connection to the Kelthani hive mind had been buzzing with conflicting signals ever since they returned to normal space. "My people are already asking questions. They can sense that I've learned something important, but they don't know what. If I don't share this knowledge soon, they'll assume it's dangerous to the hive." They docked at the university and went through the normal procedures. Customs checks, health scans, academic status verification. Everything seemed exactly the same as when they had left, but the students felt like completely different people. Professor Veltar was waiting for them at the library. The elderly Zephyrian academic had been their thesis advisor for 2 years, guiding their research into extinct species and military history. His scaled face showed relief when he saw them return. "Students, you've been gone for over a week without filing a travel plan." The administration was beginning to worry. His voice carried the authority of someone who had been teaching for longer than most species lived. "We had to investigate something," Zixtal said carefully. "We found some irregularities in the historical records." Professor Veltar's expression changed subtly. His eyes, all 6 of them, focused on the 3 students with new intensity. "What kind of irregularities?" "References to a species called Terrans," Mumbara replied, "and something called the Terran Incident." The professor was very still for a long moment. Then he gestured for them to follow him to a private office deep in the library's restricted section. "Close the door," he said once they were inside, "and activate the privacy screens." The small room suddenly filled with a soft humming sound that would prevent anyone from overhearing their conversation. "How much do you know?" Professor Veltar asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. The students looked at each other, realizing that their advisor knew more than he had ever admitted. "We know they're not extinct," Zixtal said finally. "We know they've been in exile for 200 years. And we know why." Professor Veltar sank into his chair as if a great weight had settled on his shoulders. "Then you know more than most professors at this university. More than most beings in the galaxy." "You're part of it," Quinros said. It wasn't a question. "You're part of whatever group has been hiding the truth." "The Containment Monitoring Committee," Professor Veltar admitted. 47 species, each with representatives whose job is to watch human space and assess the ongoing threat level. He activated a holographic display that showed the university's organization chart. Hidden within the normal academic structure were names and positions that the students had never heard of. The Department of Xenological Threat Assessment, the Institute for Military Evolution Studies, the Center for Containment Protocol Development. "We've been studying humans for 2 centuries, Professor Veltar continued, trying to understand them well enough to safely reintegrate them into galactic society. But every year they become more advanced, more dangerous, more human." "So you guided our research," Mumbara said, understanding flooding through her hive mind connection. "You wanted us to discover the truth." "Not just us," Professor Veltar replied. "There are students at universities across the galaxy asking the same questions. finding the same clues. The committee has decided that it's time for the next generation to understand what we're dealing with. He showed them reports from other academic institutions, students who had discovered references to the Terran incident, professors who had been gradually revealing classified information, and researchers who were beginning to question the official history of the last 2 centuries. "Why now?" Zixtal asked. Professor Veltar's expression grew grave. "Because the current situation is unsustainable. Every year, more humans are born who never agreed to the containment. Every year, their technology advances beyond our ability to monitor it. And every year, some incident almost triggers the protocols that would end human exile permanently." "What kind of protocols?" Quinross asked, though his energy form was already glowing with worry. "Military protocols," Professor Veltar replied. "Plans to either integrate humans back into galactic society or ensure they never become a threat again." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "You're talking about war," Mbara whispered. "We're talking about preventing war," Professor Veltar corrected. "The galaxy has 2 choices. Find a way to safely end human containment, or find a way to make containment permanent." He showed them classified reports from recent monitoring missions. Human ships testing the edges of their permitted space, human communication systems reaching farther into the galaxy than ever before, and most concerning, evidence that younger humans were developing new attitudes toward their exile. Admiral Chen mentioned that some humans want to break containment. Zixtal remembered. "More than some," Professor Veltar said grimly. "Our latest intelligence suggests that nearly 60% of the human population now supports ending the isolation agreement. They call it the Liberation Movement. What do they want?" Quinross asked. "What any imprisoned people want: freedom, the right to travel, to trade, to participate in galactic civilization, the right to be judged by their current actions rather than their ancestors' reputation." Professor Veltar showed them more files, human political movements, military exercises that looked suspiciously like invasion preparations, and diplomatic messages that had been sent toward galactic space but intercepted by monitoring systems. "The humans aren't planning to attack anyone," he explained. "But they are planning to leave their exile whether the galaxy approves or not. And that terrifies the Galactic Council, because if humans rejoin galactic society, other species might adopt human military methods," Mumbara said, remembering what Admiral Chen had taught them. "Exactly. The galaxy has maintained peace for 2 centuries partly because human warfare tactics remained contained. If humans begin interacting with other species again, if they share their knowledge or even just demonstrate their capabilities, it could trigger an arms race that would end galactic civilization." The 3 students sat in their chairs, overwhelmed by the weight of what they had learned. They had started out researching extinct species for an academic thesis. Now they were sitting at the center of the most important political and military crisis in galactic history. "So what happens next?" Zixtal asked. Professor Veltar looked at each of them carefully. "That depends on what you do with what you've learned. The committee has been debating this question for months. Should we tell the galaxy the truth about human capabilities, or should we continue to maintain the secret?" "What are the options?" Quinross asked. "If we reveal the truth, panic might follow. 47 species learning that their greatest fear has spent 2 centuries becoming even more fearsome. Military buildups, preemptive strike planning, maybe even the galactic war we've been trying to avoid. And if we don't reveal it, then we continue the current situation until something breaks. Either humans force their way out of containment, or the galaxy forces them deeper into it. Either way, the secret doesn't stay secret much longer." Professor Veltar activated one more display, this one showing a live feed from the edges of human space. Automated monitoring stations, weapon platforms, and ships from dozens of different species all watching and waiting. "There's a third option," he said quietly. "Controlled revelation. Gradual disclosure. Preparing the galaxy for the truth instead of hitting them with it all at once." "How?" Ambara asked. "Academic papers, research presentations, student discoveries that lead to faculty investigations that lead to policy discussions. Instead of announcing that humans are dangerous, we let the galaxy slowly realize that humans might be necessary." "Necessary for what?" Zixtal asked. Professor Veltar showed them the final display, current threats to galactic security that had been growing while everyone focused on the human problem. Aggressive species beyond the galaxy's borders, resource conflicts that were escalating toward war, and political instabilities that traditional galactic military forces seemed unable to handle. The galaxy has spent 2 centuries afraid of human military capabilities, he said. But we may have reached the point where we need those capabilities more than we fear them. The 3 students looked at the evidence before them. A hidden human civilization that had spent centuries becoming the most militarily advanced species in galactic history